The air inside the cell was cold, sterile, and humming with an artificial rhythm. The old man sat calmly in the center, wrists bound by luminous cuffs that pulsated with an eerie blue glow. He seemed wholly unbothered by his predicament. His gray beard was unkempt, his clothing a simple, earth-toned fabric that bore the marks of time. He could have been anyone from any backwater colony in the known galaxy, but the way he held himself, relaxed, observant, suggested otherwise. Beyond the reinforced barrier of his holding cell, his captors observed him with a mixture of confusion and unease. The Zalkiri were a race known for their efficiency in identifying threats, extracting information, and neutralizing risks. Yet, something about this prisoner set them on edge. He had surrendered too easily. No protest, no struggle. It was as if he had been expecting this. High Warden Zathel flicked his elongated fingers over a holographic console, scrolling through the prisoner's records. What they had was sparse, almost suspiciously so. His name was listed as Elias Rourke, human male, approximately 146 standard years old. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants, no known affiliations with any insurrectionist groups. And yet, the directive to capture him had come from the highest levels of the Galactic Tribunal. That alone was cause for concern. Zathel turned to his second-in-command, a sinewy officer named Jorvas. "He hasn't spoken?" Jorvas shook his head, his emerald-hued exoskeleton plates clicking together as he moved. "Not a word since we took him in. No resistance. No demands." Zathel exhaled sharply, his mandibles flexing. "Unusual. Bring him to interrogation." The guards approached the cell, their weapons raised as a precaution. One of them deactivated the barrier, and the old man slowly lifted his head. A ghost of a smile played at the corners of his lips as if he had just heard the setup to an inside joke. Without a word, he stood and followed them, his gait unhurried, almost casual. The interrogation chamber was a stark contrast to the cold sterility of the holding cell. The walls pulsed with shifting patterns of deep violet and obsidian, a neural disruptor field designed to weaken mental resistance. The Zalkiri prided themselves on their ability to break even the most stubborn minds. But as Elias Rourke was seated, his luminous restraints linked to the chair, something strange happened. The disruptor field flickered, sputtered, then failed. Zathel narrowed his eyes. "Strange." Rourke chuckled, the sound deep and resonant. "That's one word for it." Jorvas stiffened. "Explain." The old man leaned back slightly. "Oh, I think you already have your suspicions. You just don't want to say them out loud." Zathel studied him, his mandibles twitching. "You were marked for capture by the tribunal." "Why?" Rourke exhaled through his nose, his eyes distant for a moment, as if weighing his words. Then he smiled again, though this time there was something else beneath it. Something ancient, something patient. "Let's just say, they remember me." The Zalkiri exchanged glances. Zathel pressed further. "You have no recorded history that would justify such an order that you can access," Rourke corrected. "You see, son, I've been around a long time. Longer than your tribunal. Longer than this prison. Longer than you can imagine." Jorvas scoffed. "You're 146. Hardly ancient." Rourke's smile didn't waver. "Do you know why you're afraid? Why your little machine in the walls just failed? Why your instincts are screaming at you to stop this interrogation right now?" Zathel felt something akin to dread creeping along his spine. This human, he didn't have the presence of a frail old man. He had the presence of something vast. Something that had seen the rise and fall of empires. Something that, for whatever reason, had allowed itself to be captured. Zathel swallowed his apprehension and leaned in. "What are you?" Rourke's smile widened, and for the first time, his eyes truly gleamed with an unnatural, knowing light. "Would you like me to show you?" Before either Zalkiri could react, the walls of the chamber trembled. The holographic displays flickered wildly before displaying incomprehensible symbols. The restraints on Rourke's wrists disengaged with a hiss, and the entire room was filled with a resonant hum, as if the very fabric of reality was vibrating around them. Jorvas stumbled backward, his claws reaching for his weapon. "High Warden!" Zathel barely had time to process what was happening before Rourke stood, stretching his arms as if shaking off centuries of confinement. His form shimmered, and for a brief instant, the Zalkiri saw something impossible, something vast, endless, and older than time itself. Rourke's voice was calm but carried a weight that made the air itself feel denser. "You should have left me alone." And then the room exploded into light. When the light receded, Zathel found himself kneeling on the floor, his head spinning. Around him, his officers lay sprawled, unconscious. The room had transformed. The walls were no longer rigid metal but an ever-shifting cascade of stars and nebulae. Rourke stood at the center, untouched, his form still flickering between solid and ephemeral. "You don't understand what you've done," Rourke said softly. "But you will," Jorvass groaned, pushing himself up. What are you?" Rourke regarded him with something akin to pity. "I was human once. Before time and space bent around me." Zathel struggled to his feet. "The tribunal. They fear you, as they should." Rourke turned toward the shifting void where the door had been. "You've given them my location. They will come." Zathel's voice was hoarse. "What happens now?" Rourke smiled, and the stars behind him pulsed. Now you see what happens when they try to put eternity in a cage." And with that, reality itself began to unravel. The walls cracked apart like brittle glass, revealing not a prison, but a cosmic expanse beyond. The Zalkiri station flickered between existence and nothingness, as if the universe itself were re-evaluating its place in the grand design. Ships in orbit received garbled distress signals before vanishing into spirals of impossible geometry. The tribunal's fleet arrived too late. They found nothing but drifting fragments of a station that no longer belonged to this reality. Rourke was gone. Some say he was never truly there to begin with. Legends would spread across the stars of the old human the tribunal dared to imprison. But those who understood whispered in hushed tones, never speaking his name, for fear he might hear. For eternity was patient, and it never forgot.